The Galactic Military Academy on Zenthara Prime had seen many species pass through its halls. Varkins with their 4 arms and chitinous armor. Silverian telepaths whose minds could crush steel. Even the dreaded Krex warriors, standing 9 feet tall with acidic blood running through their veins. But never, in its 300-year history, had it seen anything quite like Cadet Luna Chen. She stood barely 5 feet 4 inches in the morning formation, her dark hair pulled back in regulation style, brown eyes scanning the horizon with quiet determination. To most of her alien classmates, she looked fragile, breakable, a cosmic joke that somehow the humans had convinced the Galactic Council to accept into their most elite military program. Commander Thex towered over her, his reptilian frame casting a shadow that could eclipse a small moon. His scales gleamed green and black in the artificial sunlight, and his yellow eyes held a kind of predatory gleam that had made his species the most feared warriors in 3 sectors. For 20 years, he had molded cadets into killing machines. For 20 years, no one had dared question his methods. That was about to change. So, Thex hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air around Luna, the famous human cadet. Tell me, little mammal, what makes you think you belong among real warriors? Luna's voice remained steady, professional. Sir, I believe my test scores and physical evaluation speak for themselves. A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the assembled cadets. Varkon clicking, Silverian mental whispers, Krex guttural chuckles. The sound made Luna's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Test scores. Thex's laugh was like grinding metal. Child, I have been breaking recruits since before your pathetic little world even discovered faster than light travel. I have seen Krex warriors weep like newborns under my training. I have watched Silverian mind readers beg for mercy when their telepathy failed them. And you think numbers on a datapad mean anything to me? He began circling her, each footstep deliberate, predatory. His claws clicked against the metal deck, plating with each step. The other cadets watched in fascination and horror, knowing they were witnessing either the birth of a legend or the destruction of a foolish human who had bitten off more than she could chew. Your species is new here, human. You think because you defeated the hegemony in one little war. After all, you managed to impress a few diplomats with your tenacity. So you have earned your place among us? Let me educate you about the natural order things. Luna said nothing. Her breathing remained controlled, measured. But something flickered behind her eyes. Something that would have made a wiser predator pause. Humans are weak, Thex continued, his voice growing louder, more theatrical. The other instructors watched with interest from the sidelines. This was standard procedure for breaking down difficult recruits. You have no natural weapons, no armored hide, no telepathic abilities, no acid blood. You are nothing but soft meat wrapped around brittle bones, and you dare stand among your betters. Still, Luna remained silent. The morning breeze carried the scent of ionized metal and ozone from a nearby weapon ranges. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's engines roared to life. Nothing to say, little human? Good. Perhaps you are finally learning your place. Thex stopped in front of her, so close that his breath fogged her helmet visor. Now, since you need a lesson in respect, you will give me 100 push-ups. Right here, right now. Let us see how long those pathetic human muscles can last. Luna dropped to ground without hesitation. Her form was perfect, mechanical. 1, 2, 3. The count echoed across the formation grounds as other cadets watched in stunned silence. 10, 20, 30. Still perfect form. Still controlled breathing. At 50, Thex's expression began to shift from amusement to irritation. At 75, his claws extended slightly. At 100, Luna popped back to attention as if she had done nothing more strenuous than check her pulse. Impressive, Thex admitted with grudging respect. But physical conditioning is only one aspect of a warrior's training. Mental fortitude is equally important. Tell me, Cadet, what would you do if you were captured by enemy forces? Follow the Geneva Convention protocols as adapted for interstellar warfare, sir. Name, rank, serial number, and species of origin only. Geneva Convention? Thex's laugh was bitter. Child, The Geneva Convention means nothing when hegemony torturers are peeling the skin from your bones, when they are pumping you full of neural toxins that make every nerve in your body scream in agony, when they are threatening to space your squad mates one by one unless you give them the information they want. Luna's voice never wavered. Then I would remember my training and my duty to my fellow service members, sir. Duty? The word came out like a curse. Let me show you what duty means when you are facing real consequences. What happened next took place in the span of perhaps 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds will be replayed in security footage, dissected by military analysts and discussed in tactical academies for decades to come. Thex's clawed hand swung in a vicious arc toward Luna's face. Not a training exercise, not a drill, a genuine attempt to teach a lesson through pain and humiliation. His claws gleamed in the artificial sunlight, capable of rending metal plating. The slap connected with Luna's cheek with a sound like a plasma rifle discharge. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The other cadets held their breath. The wind died to nothing. Even the distant sounds of training exercises seemed to pause in anticipation. Luna's head snapped to the side from the impact. A thin line of red appeared on her cheek, where one of Thex's claws had found flesh. When she turned back to face him, her expression had changed completely. Gone was a respectful, professional cadet. In her place stood something else entirely. Something that had survived the burning ruins of New Geneva. Something that had watched her homeworld die and had chosen to forge itself into a weapon of retribution. Her smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice now carrying an edge that made the nearby Krex warriors shift uncomfortably. "I was wondering when the real training would begin." Thex blinked, momentarily confused. This was not the response he had expected. Tears, perhaps. Pleading. Maybe anger or indignation. But not this calm, predatory satisfaction. "I beg your pardon, cadet." "Well, sir, you just demonstrated something very important about interspecies combat that I am sure you intended as a learning experience for all of us." Luna's smile grew wider, and several of the alien cadets took involuntary steps backward. "You showed us that when facing an opponent whose capabilities you do not fully understand, overconfidence can be fatal." She moved. Later analysis would show that Luna Chen moved faster than any unaugmented human had ever been recorded moving. Her body became a blur of controlled violence that seemed to defy the laws of physics. But in that moment, all anyone could see was the impossible happening right before their eyes. Her right hand snapped forward in a perfect knife-hand strike that caught Thex directly in the throat. The impact lifted the massive reptilian commander completely off his feet and sent him staggering backward, gasping for air. Before he could recover, Luna was inside his guard. Her left elbow connected with his solar plexus with the force of a meteor impact. Her knee came up to meet his descending head with surgical precision. The sound of Thex's jawbone breaking was audible across the entire formation ground. He dropped his knees, yellow eyes wide with shock and pain, his once mighty jaw hanging at an unnatural angle. Dark blood pooled in the dust around him. Luna stood over him, not even breathing hard, holding a piece of white bone between her fingers. She examined it with clinical interest, turning it this way and that in the artificial sunlight. "Interesting," she mused, as if discussing the weather. "Reptilian bone structure is more brittle than I expected. The Academy textbook suggested it would require significantly more force to achieve this result." She looked down at Thex, who was struggling to remain conscious through the pain and shock. Her voice became conversational, almost friendly. "You know, Commander, you were right about humans having no natural weapons. We do not have claws or fangs, or an armored hide. What we do have is something far more dangerous." She held up the fragment of his jawbone. "We can learn, to adapt, to take the weapons our enemies provide and turn them against them with interest." The formation ground had fallen completely silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped blowing. 40 seconds, Luna announced cheerfully, checking her chronometer. "From assault to victory in 40 seconds. I do hope this serves as an adequate demonstration of human potential for your records, sir." She snapped to attention and addressed the stunned assembly of cadets and instructors. "Now then, shall we proceed with the morning training schedule?" I believe we were scheduled for close-quarters combat exercises, and I find myself feeling quite enthusiastic about the curriculum. The silence stretched on for several more heartbeats. Then, slowly, the sound of applause began to ripple through the alien cadets. First, the Varkans, clicking their mandibles in appreciation. Then the Silverians, their mental approval washing over the assembled crowd like a warm wave. Even the mighty Krex warriors began their traditional war chant respect for a worthy opponent. Luna Chun, human cadet, had just redefined what it meant to be dangerous in a galaxy full of predators. And this was only the beginning. News of the incident spread through Zenthara Prime faster than a quantum transmission. Within hours, security footage of Luna Chun dismantling Commander Thex had been viewed by every military official in 3 sectors. Within days, it had reached the Galactic Council itself. Luna found herself sitting in a sterile white room deep within the Academy's administrative complex, facing a tribunal of the most powerful beings in known space. To her left sat Admiral Zex Corvain, a Silverian whose telepathic abilities could reduce most minds to gibbering madness. To her right loomed General Brackthorn, a Krex War leader whose very presence made the air taste of ozone and violence. At the center sat High Commander Vel Zathros, a Varkan whose 4 arms had once held the severed heads of a dozen enemy leaders simultaneously. And yet, as Luna looked around the room, she could not help but notice that she was the only one who seemed completely relaxed. Cadet Chun, Admiral Corvain's voice resonated directly inside her skull, bypassing her ears entirely. Do you understand why you have been brought before this tribunal? Luna's response was steady, professional. I assume it is regarding the training incident with Commander Gordak, sir. Training incident? General Thorne's laugh was like grinding stone. Cadet, you destroyed the jawbone of a senior instructor in front of 200 witnesses. You turned one of our most experienced combat trainers into a medical emergency. That is not a training incident. That is an act of aggression that borders on assault. With respect, sir, Luna replied, her voice carrying just a hint of steel. Commander Gordak initiated physical contact. I merely responded according to my training and the inherent right of self-defense recognized by Galactic Military Code Section 12, Subsection 4. High Commander Zathros leaned forward, his 4 eyes focusing on her with laser intensity. Your training? Cadet, what training could prepare a human to defeat a reptilian commander with 2 decades of combat experience? Luna's smile was small, cold, and completely without humor. The kind of training you receive when your homeworld is burned to ash by alien invaders, sir. The room fell silent. Even the hum of the environmental systems seemed to quiet in response to her words. New Geneva, Admiral Corvain said softly, his mental voice carrying undertones of sudden understanding. You are one of the survivors. I am the survivor, sir. The only one who made it off-world before the hegemony glass bombers finished their work. Luna's voice remained steady, but her eyes had taken on a quality that made even these hardened military leaders shift uncomfortably. 3.7 billion people. Reduced to radioactive dust in 6 hours. My parents, my siblings, my friends, my teachers, my neighbors, everyone I had ever known or loved. Gone. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the tribunal. So when Commander Gordak wanted to teach me about the consequences of capture, about torture, about watching your comrades die while you could do nothing to help them, I found his lesson somewhat redundant. You see, gentlemen, I have already graduated from that particular course of study. General Thorne's massive frame seemed to deflate slightly. The Battle of New Geneva, that was 8 years ago. You would have been a child. 16 years old, Luna confirmed. Old enough to enlist in the Colonial Defense Force. Old enough to watch the sky turn white when the first orbital bombardment began. Old enough to kill 17 hegemony soldiers with my bare hands while evacuating the civilian shelters. Admiral Corvain's telepathic probe touched the edges of her mind and recoiled instantly, as if burned. The images he glimpsed there, the memories of violence and loss and cold, calculating rage, were unlike anything he had encountered in 3 centuries of military service. You volunteered for the Academy, High Commander Zathros observed. Why? Luna's laugh was soft, almost musical and completely terrifying. Because, sir, the war is not over. Oh, I know what the politicians say. The hegemony has been defeated. Peace treaties have been signed. Reparations are being paid. But wars like this one, genocidal wars, they do not end with pieces of paper and diplomatic ceremonies. She stood up, and for a moment, the three most powerful military leaders in the galaxy found themselves looking up at a human who suddenly seemed to fill the room with her presence. They end when every single being responsible for what happened to my world is dead, when their fleets are scattered, wreckage drifts in the void, when their colonies are empty monuments to the consequences of attempting genocide against humanity. The hegemony may think the war is over. I am here to make sure they are wrong. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Admiral Corvain spoke, his mental voice barely a whisper. And Commander Gordak? Was an object lesson. Luna replied simply, I needed to establish my capabilities early in my academy career. Better to handle any questions about human combat effectiveness now, when the stakes are relatively low, than later when lives might depend on my reputation preceding me into battle. General Thorne made a sound that might have been approval. And if we decide that you are too dangerous to remain in the academy, if we determine that your psychological profile makes you unsuitable for military service, Luna's smile was sharp enough to cut through hull plating. Then I suppose you would have to try to stop me from leaving. And gentlemen, with all due respect, after reviewing the security footage of this morning's demonstration, do you think that would end well for anyone involved? High Commander Zathros was quiet for a long moment, his four arms folded across his chin in his chest. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Cadet Chen, you will report for advanced combat training beginning tomorrow at 0600 hours. You will be transferred to Alpha Company, our most elite training unit. Your instructors will be selected from combat veterans of at least 5 major engagements. You will be pushed to your absolute limits and beyond. Luna nodded once, crisply. Understood, sir. Furthermore, the High Commander continued, you'll undergo psychological evaluation every 30 days. Any sign that your trauma is affecting your decision-making capability or endangering your fellow cadets will result in immediate dismissal from the program. Acknowledged, sir. And Cadet, General Thorne's voice carried a note of dark amusement. Commander Gordak has requested to be assigned as your primary close-quarters combat instructor once his jaw heals. He finds you interesting. Luna's grin was positively predatory. Outstanding, sir. I look forward to continuing my education under his guidance. As she turned to leave, Admiral Corvain's mental voice touched her mind one last time. Luna Chun, that fragment of Jawbone you kept, what did you do with it? She paused at the door, not turn around. I had it mounted on a small chain, sir. I wear it around my neck now. A reminder that in this galaxy, the only thing that truly matters is being willing to do whatever it takes to protect what you care about. And what do you care about now, Cadet? Your home world is gone. Your family is dead. What drives you forward? Luna's voice was quiet, thoughtful. The future, sir. The human children who will never have to watch their world burn, because I made sure their enemies were too afraid to light the match. The colonies that will thrive in peace, because I made the price of threatening them too high to pay. The galaxy that will learn to respect humanity not through fear of our weapons or our technology, but through absolute certainty that we will never, ever stop fighting for what we believe in. She opened the door and stepped into the corridor beyond. Good day, gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity to serve. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss, leaving the 3 most powerful military leaders in the galaxy alone with their thoughts. Well, General Thorne rumbled after a moment. That was enlightening. Terrified, more like, Admiral Corvain replied, that human is not a soldier. She is a weapon that has learned to think for itself. High Commander Zathros was quiet for several long minutes, processing what they had just witnessed. Finally, he reached a decision that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Gentlemen, he said slowly, I believe we have just met the future of warfare, and I suggest we make very sure that the future remains pointed away from us and toward our enemies. 3 months later, Cadet Chen graduated first in her class from the Galactic Military Academy. She was commissioned as a lieutenant in the Special Operations Division and assigned to the newly formed Human Expeditionary Force. 6 months after graduation, she led her first mission deep into former hegemony space. She returned with intelligence that led to the capture of 3 war criminals and the liberation of 2 slave colonies. 1 year later, her unit had become legendary throughout the galaxy. They were known as the Reapers, and their reputation preceded them into every battle. And somewhere in the depths of space, in hidden bunkers and secret meeting rooms, former hegemony leaders began to understand that the war they thought they had ended was just beginning. 2 years after her graduation, Luna stood on the bridge of the destroyer-class vessel New Geneva's Vengeance, watching through the viewport as her target came into view. The former hegemony fortress world of Kallex Prime hung in space like a diseased jewel, its surface scarred by the defensive installations that had once protected genocide fleets. "Ma'am," her communications officer, a young Varkon named Thex, reported with barely contained excitement. "We are receiving surrender transmissions from 17 different facilities on the planet's surface. They are offering complete capitulation in exchange for mercy." Luna's reflection in the viewport showed a woman who had been transformed by years of warfare into something harder than diamond and twice as sharp. The small scar on her cheek from Commander Gordak's claws had faded to a thin white line, but her eyes held depths that spoke of battles fought in the darkest corners of space. "Mercy," she repeated thoughtfully, rolling the word around in her mouth like she was tasting something unfamiliar. "Communications. Please transmit the following message on all frequencies." She turned to face the recording device, and every being on the bridge felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "To the former hegemony commanders currently occupying Kallex Prime, this is Lieutenant Colonel Luna Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force. You have 1 hour to evacuate all civilian populations to the designated safe zones. Any military personnel found on the planet after that deadline will be considered hostile combatants and dealt with accordingly." She paused, her smile cold enough to freeze hydrogen. "As for mercy, I want you to remember the mercy you showed the children of New Geneva when your glass bombers turned the sky white above their schools. I want you to remember the mercy you showed the elderly in their hospitals, the families in their homes, the lovers walking hand in hand through parks that became radioactive graveyards in minutes." The transmission continued across every communication channel in the system, reaching ears both friendly and hostile. "That is the exact amount of mercy you will receive from me today. New Geneva sends its regards." Behind her, Commander Thex Gordak, now serving as her tactical advisor despite his rebuilt jaw clicking slightly when he spoke, allowed himself a predatory grin of approval. The human had become everything he had hoped to forge during those early days at the Academy. She was death incarnate, wrapped in a uniform of justice. "All stations report ready, Colonel," he announced. "The Reapers await your command." Luna nodded once, her hand moving to touch the small piece of bone that still hung around her neck under her uniform, a reminder of the day she had learned that the galaxy would either respect humanity or fear it, but never again would they ignore it. Fire. The planet below erupted in cleansing fire, and the ghost of New Geneva finally began to rest, because Luna Chen had kept her promise. The human children would never have to watch their worlds burn. She would make sure of that, no matter what it costs.